say hello to Congresswoman Pelosi.
Hello, Representative Pelosi.
Good evening, Edward.
Hi. I was one of the 20 non-registrants who were picked out as draft resistance organizers in the early 1980s. I spent 6 months in a federal prison camp for refusing to agree to fight on the side of the people who would become the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, who were the people we were then backing in Afghanistan. And it seems to me that the current debate about the draft has been oddly detached from the reality of ongoing draft registration, which President Bush could end with the stroke of a pen, which Senator Kerry could have introduced legislation to end, or could have pledged to issue a proclamation ending on Inauguration Day. And my question for you, as my representative from here in San Francisco, and more broadly to the Democratic leadership, is why you have not called the Republicans' bluff and put the pressure on them to actually end draft registration.
That's a terrific question. Let me stop you just for a second there, Edward, so that we can get the response from the Congresswoman.
Well, I'm not unsympathetic to your point of view, Edward. That it is necessary for us to have a force, and I think most young people don't realize that when they become 18 years old, they are under law required to sign up for the draft. Well, not for the draft, but under the selective service. I think that it is something that we really should subject to some scrutiny to see why this is still necessary and why there's a penalty if you don't. I mean, it can be held against you in your college applications, your job applications, and the rest. So I think it's a debate that we should have as a country. Long before the draft was over, I was opposed to the draft. So, I'm not, again, unsympathetic to your point of view about eliminating, I guess you want to eliminate the selective service system altogether, or at least the mandatory sign-up. I think it's worthy of attention.
Thank you, Edward, for bringing that up, and thank you for the call. One reason Congress and the candidates began to pay attention to the draft issue is because the well-known Get Out the Vote group, Rock the Vote, posted a mock draft card on its website that people could send in to their friends. Were you aware of this, Congresswoman, when it happened, or did you see it after the fact?
Oh, I saw it after the fact.
Right?
Yes.
And we have Jay Strell of Rock the Vote on the line. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thank you very much. How are you guys doing tonight?
We are well, thank you. It's good to have you here over the telephone. What kind of a response did you get
Congressman Pelosi.
Excuse me for interrupting you guys saying hello.
Good evening, Jay.
Good evening.
What kind of response did you get to the draft campaign, Jay?
It's been tremendous, really. I mean, we've really been on this issue going back to May when Senator Joe Biden and Senator Chuck Hagel, both respected members of the Senate from both sides of the aisles, said that we should start having an open and honest dialogue about the draft, given the strain on our military. And we put a poll on our website to ask young people if this was an issue they were concerned about, and overwhelmingly, well over 50% said yes, it's an issue that we're concerned about, and it became a part of a centerpiece of our campaign, because Rock the Vote is dedicated to getting not only young people engaged in the political process, but getting the candidates and the lawmakers to speak directly to them about issues that they're concerned.
And Jay, you made the Republican Party pretty angry, right? There was a letter that came to you. Tell us what happened.
We did. It's unfortunate because we, as a nonpartisan organization, we, work with both parties. We had we worked with the college Republicans at the Republican convention to hold a nomination night watch party, and a month and a half later, we get a letter from from Mr. Gillespie asking us to cease and desist our campaign, that we're running a malicious campaign, and that because the president and the vice president and Secretary Rumsfeld say there's not going to be a draft, we should stop talking about it.
And your response when you got that?
Our response was, look, we're an organization based on defending free expression, and this is something that young people are concerned about, and what they deserve is a real debate and open and honest dialogue about the issue, not phony votes in Congress or campaign promises that are made that ultimately they either candidate may be unable to keep.
So, Congresswoman Pelosi, should the issue of the draft be beyond the participation of nonpartisan groups like Rock the Vote?
Absolutely not. This is about the fate of our young people. And by the way, people think of the draft or they think of military service, they think of 18, 19, 20-year-old. The length of this occupation in Iraq is going to be such that if you're a mother with a child who's 12 years old, you should be very concerned.
And we got calls yesterday from parents of very young children with that exact concern.
No, it is something that we should talk about. We should talk about what Edward suggested about why do we even have to register at age 18. We should talk about how we choose to go to war and deploy our troops and how we share the sacrifice. I think it's as bad as an important an issue because it talks about our first responsibility in the Constitution, to provide for the common defense. We all take that seriously, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it.
No question. Thanks, Jay. Listen, if folks want to send the draft card to their friends, they can go to your site, right? rockthevote.com to find it.
Exactly.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for joining us, Jay.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks for what you're doing, Jay.
Thank you.
And let's take some calls here now from the audience. And Frank is on the line in Las Vegas. Frank, welcome to the show. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you. Considering the amount of flack that the Democrats have given the administration for fear-mongering about terrorism, don't you find it hypocritical that you are now using fear of a draft as a tool to scare people into voting against Bush? And isn't that the purpose of this show, to scare people?
Well, I certainly know, I can speak for the show, that the purpose of the show is not to scare people. The purpose of the show is to inform people, and I think if you've been watching the last few days, and if you continue to watch tonight, you'll know that's the case. Congresswoman, from your side?
Well, I think that this show is providing a very good service, but I don't think that this is fear-mongering. The draft is an issue that affects every family in America, and we have to have some answers. If you have a course of action that requires increased capability of our military forces, and there is no visible sign of where they're going to come from, but from constriction, it's not fear-mongering on our part. It's facing the reality that this foreign policy, this approach to use of war, will lead us to.
Yes,
a
and
Democrat
Frank,
sponsored the bill.
A Democrat sponsored the bill. Frank, thanks for the call.
That's not fear-mongering?
No, Frank, thanks for the call. The purpose of the sponsorship, as I understand it, and as explained by the Congresswoman, was to bring up this discussion. And thank you for the call and for your point of view. Nath, in Fort Irwin, California, welcome to the show.
Hi, Congresswoman.
Hi.
My question was, I'm a first lieutenant about to deploy, and playing devil's advocate, what enticement are politicians considering outside of monetary rewards, regardless of who gets elected? What's being pursued to increase the overall number of active duty soldiers? And how would Kerry intend to recruit 40,000 special operations personnel when we're supposedly facing a recruiting shortcoming or shortfall?
Very good question. First of all, let me commend you for your patriotism, your valor, and the sacrifice you're willing to make for our country. We're all very, very proud of our men and women in uniform, and we ought to build a future worthy of that sacrifice here at home while you are fighting overseas. The question is a good one, because the experience that many in the military are having now in Iraq, it will make it harder to retain and to recruit. There will be some embellishments. There have to be enhancements in order to attract people to the military, and I think one of them would be that unless it was absolutely necessary, they would not be placed in harm's way, but they could pursue the career or for a short period of time in their lives a course of action to serve our country and then to come home and enjoy their families.
Nate, thanks so much for that call, and let's say hello to Bob in O'Brien, Oregon. Bob, we're glad you're with us here at Link TV.
Hi there. I'd like to thank Nancy for her great service.
Thank you, Bob.
My question, it really is a very basic one. Knowing how many troops roughly that we have tied up in Afghanistan and Iraq right now, what my question is, if we had another major national or international emergency where we had to deploy troops, how far away from being totally tapped out as far as resources, as far as troops, are we? In other words, I'm really trying to get a feel of how close we are to needing a draft or some other method of enticing more people into the military.
A concern we've heard over the last couple of days.
Well, it's a good question, and the Department of Defense operates under a policy of 3-to-1 rotation. So for every one number of people who are in the theater of war, there's one recuperating, troop rotation recuperating, and one troop rotation preparing to go. Right now we are overextended. So with what's happening with our deployments in the rest of the world, we're down to about a 2.3-to-1 ratio, which is too low. And if the 2 brigades deployed to Korea are included, that ratio, if you include what's in Korea, that ratio falls to 2-to-1. That's dangerously short of what our requirements are. And it's for that and other reasons that some of us are concerned that if we're going to make a commitment of troops, that at some point the capability will be exhausted, both in terms of actual people at war and rotating in or out. And that's why we have questions about the draft, to which the draft is one answer.
An important call and question. Thank you for that, Bob. John is on the line from San Antonio, Texas, with a critical question. Let's hear it, John, please. Welcome.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say Link TV, I'm very impressed, and it's about time. Also, my question is, to avoid the draft, it would make sense to me that we avoid more conflict. What really does concern me is the fact that our leader, the president, George Bush, takes a Christian stance in his posture towards these conflicts, which very much scares me because it's an age-old tradition of Christian-Muslim war and religious conflict. And this is not what this should be about at all.
And what is your question for the Congresswoman?
My question for the Congresswoman is, how can we avoid getting it further into greater conflict in the Middle East with Iran and also with North Korea, so that we don't have to institute the draft? I have 2 boys that I don't want to have to see go into the military.
Well, my generation was inspired by President Kennedy when he was inaugurated, and in the course of his presidency said many things that are true today, holds up today. And in his inaugural address, we all remember what he said about ask not what your country can do for you. But the very next line in the speech, President Kennedy said, to the citizens of the world, ask not what America can do for you, but what we can do working together for the freedom of mankind. And I think that is the philosophy that Senator Kerry would bring, and I think that any president should bring, how we can work in collaboration and cooperation with other countries for the freedom of mankind, and not in condescension and disrespect as the present administration is doing. I would hope that anyone who is president of the United States would try to build the peace through cooperation. If we have to go to war, as President Kennedy also said, bear any burden, pay any price, fight any foe, but come back to the point that we can avoid that.
A speech worth remembering clearly. Let's now find Jacinta. We lost you earlier, and it's good to have you back in Fort Campbell, Texas. Welcome to the program, Jacinta.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for being here in this program.
Thank you.
Putting a voice to this situation. My question is, what can Congress do to help these families? My husband has been in for 5 years now. I have only physically lived with him for 2 years because of so many rotations and deployments. And what can Congress do to help us?
Well, you certainly have the right person here to answer that question. Congresswoman, help.
There are a number of people in Congress. I'm very proud of our senior Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, Congressman Ike Skelton of Missouri. He takes the lead for us in putting families first, the military families first. We all talk about the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, but their families are a major part of that sacrifice. I really don't want to, and I know that Fort Campbell is so very, very important, and I salute all of you for the sacrifice you are making for our country. And I don't want this to be partisan, and I wish it didn't have to be. But we can do more, and our initiatives to do more have been rejected by the administration, just as they say support the troops, when we say, okay, we want to take some money from the tax cut of the wealthiest people in our country, people making over $1 million a year, take a percentage, not all, a percentage of that tax cut, and put it for military housing for our families.
So can you offer
the
hope to
Republicans
Jacinta?
Voted it down.
Can you offer
I
hope
can
to
offer her
Jacinta?
hope because there are initiatives. We can offer bonuses to the families of men and women serving in uniform. We lost 213 to 213. It was a Democratic initiative. We got about 7 Republicans to vote for us. We lost because it was a tie, and the Republican leadership twisted arms so that we didn't win. But I think there is hope. We are trying to make these choices more visible to the public.
This helps, Jacinta.
The more the public knows about the opportunities that are there and that are rejected, then hopefully that will change the vote in Congress. And it certainly will if we have a change of administration.
You're good. You got that in again, and it's okay, because that's why we asked you to come
Well, I'm the
here.
Democratic leader.
Of course.
You get what you invite.
Of course, and that's why we invited you. Jacinta, thanks for the call. Congresswoman,
Jacinta.
during our series this week, callers have complained about soldiers lacking protective equipment in Iraq. It's not just these kinds of worries that Jacinta has. And a New York Times article explained that $420 billion will be spent on national security in 2005, mostly to develop high-tech weapons systems. It's estimated that $72 billion more will be needed for the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, but some analysts are saying that they expect a shortfall of $1 billion a month. This year there was an $8 billion shortfall for the basic needs of soldiers at war in Iraq. Now, can you explain, Congresswoman, why it is that soldiers can't get the funds needed to protect them properly out of Congress?
Don't get me started.
Okay. That's again why you're here. Explain it,
This
please.
is very sad. The Department of Defense, don't take my word for it, the Department of Defense has said that 1/4 of those who lost their lives or were injured in Iraq, and that would be 1,100 who lost their lives and probably another 9,000 more who were injured, would have been saved if they had the proper equipment. This administration sent them into a preemptive war, a war of the president's own timing, without proper preparation.
But is there any argument? Is there any argument that Congress has money available that once they see this problem, they can provide that money to protect the troops?
Well, the Democrats in the Congress insisted that in the $87 billion, but when that was proposed, it didn't have the additional equipment for our troops. And you know what the Republicans said? They said, well, those Kevlar lining for the jackets and the Humvee armor for the Humvees and the jammers to stop the improvised explosive devices, that was just for the troops on the front line. We couldn't be expected to have that for everyone.
So you feel comfortable that Congress has done all that it can and should do?
But the troops still don't have everything they need because, again, the administration didn't know what it was getting into, didn't plan to give them the equipment they needed, and it's taken some time now to get more, now that this has been exposed and the Democrats have insisted that the troops have what they need, whether they're on the front line or not.
We could go all night, and we look forward to having you back because it is a scintillating conversation and so important, as so many viewers and listeners have said. Now, here's a last question. You told the Washington Post that anyone who says the policies of this administration will lead to a draft is absolutely correct. Again, if John Kerry wins, how can you be sure that his policies won't de facto lead to a draft?
Well, because he will have a values-based foreign policy that will say, make sure everyone knows that we will do whatever it takes to protect the American people, but that we will maintain the peace by working in a collaborative way with all countries in the world to minimize the risk to the American people and to have many countries join us when there is just cause to go to war and not have the American people losing the lives, paying the tax dollars, and losing our reputation throughout the world.
We want to thank you so much, Congresswoman Pelosi, House Minority Leader, for joining us here at Link TV's
My pleasure.
Fact.
Thank you so much.